Welcome friends, you're watching the Ruslan Belov channel. Today is May 4th, 2026, and it has been an exceptionally eventful day. Several directions have seen significant map updates, and in the Middle East, the situation around the Strait of Hormuz continues to heat up to a critical point. There's a lot to cover, so settle in. We're going to break it all down properly. Before we begin, a sincere request. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so right now, and make sure to hit the bell icon and select notifications for all new videos. YouTube is actively suppressing this type of content, limiting its reach algorithmically. Your subscription, your like, and your bell notification are what keep this channel alive and ensure this analysis reaches the people who need it. It takes just a few seconds, but for the channel it means everything. Thank you in advance to each and every one of you. A special thank you to our sponsors and to those viewers who have supported the channel through the Super Thanks feature. Your contribution allows us to keep working at a high standard without interruption. Sumy sector, Russian forces closing in on Krasnopilia. Let's start with the northern flank, the Sumy sector, where several significant advances were recorded over the past 24 hours. The first and perhaps most telling development is the movement of Russian units in the southeastern part of the Sumy region, specifically in the area of Dnipropetrovsk. Neutral mapping services have recorded a Russian advance in the westward direction. The forward positions of the Russian army near Dnipropetrovsk are now less than 2 kilometers from the eastern outskirts of Krasnopilia. This is no longer an abstract approach to a line. This is a real distance at which assault groups can operate in direct fire contact with the settlement. A reminder, just days ago, the Russian Ministry of Defense officially reported the conclusion of fighting for Myropilya. With resources freed up on that axis, Russian forces shifted their main effort strictly westward. The logic of the offensive line is fairly clear. Dnipropetrovsk, Taratutin, Ryazne form a kind of forward staging ground from which the Russian side intends to push further toward Krasnopilia and Khmelivka. As for Ryazne, reports are already coming in of full-scale urban combat. According to pro-Ukrainian mapping services, which is itself telling, when the opposing side is forced to acknowledge losses, Russian units have managed to significantly improve their positions in both the eastern and central parts of the settlement. Fighting is taking place directly within the built-up area, which means this is no longer about approaching a line, it is a block-by-block battle. Kharkiv sector. The battle for the bridgehead on the Vovcha River continues. On the Kharkiv axis, the main development of the day concerns the situation following the conclusion of fighting for the settlement of Zemlyanka. Russian units, having secured that position, shifted their activity strictly westward, toward the settlement of Budarki. This is a fundamentally important point that deserves special attention. Budarki is already the second settlement located directly on the Ukrainian side of the Vovcha River, in the most remote northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast, for which Russian forces are now launching active combat operations. In essence, the North troop grouping is systematically working to expand and consolidate its bridgehead on the southern, that is, Ukrainian, bank of the Vovcha River. The significance of this bridgehead goes well beyond local tactics. Holding and expanding it creates conditions for long-term operational pressure on northern Kharkiv Oblast. Further map corrections from this direction should be expected in the near term. On the Kupiansk and Borova axes, no significant changes were recorded over the past 24 hours. Sloviansk direction. Crossing of the Siversky Donets, a serious warning for Ukrainian defense now, arguably the most important news of the day, which demands the closest possible attention. On the Sloviansk direction, the map has undergone very substantial changes over the past 24 hours. As recently as May 2, 2026, the situation looked fundamentally different. On May 3rd, the first correction was made on the eastern outskirts of Prishayb, based on footage published by the Ukrainian side itself. That material showed the presence of Russian army assault units, approximately 4 personnel, who after crossing the Siversky Donets were advancing toward the eastern edge of the settlement. Today, several expert analysts confirmed Russian forces not only reached the opposite bank, but have entrenched themselves in the area of the fortified positions at Prishayb. Furthermore, additional footage published today confirms the presence of Russian units on the northeastern outskirts of the settlement of Tatyánivka. Let's be direct. This is an extremely serious operational development. Crossing a major water obstacle and holding a bridgehead on the far bank is not a routine tactical event. It represents a bid to fundamentally alter the configuration of the front on this sector. Consider the geography. The chain of settlements Sosnov, Sviatohirsk, Tatyánivka, Prishib, then Bohorodishne and Sidorov forms a potential corridor from which the Russian army gains the ability to strike Sloviansk from the north. From the north, a direction where, by all indications, the Ukrainian defense was not primarily prepared for such a scenario. A brief historical note is necessary. The last time Russian units were present in Tatyánivka and Prishib was back in 2022. Following the Ukrainian Kharkiv counteroffensive in the autumn of 2022, the Russian army was forced to withdraw from those positions. Now, a return, and one achieved by crossing a water barrier, which makes this success considerably more significant in military terms. The Ukrainian side is responding. Active artillery fire is being directed at Russian unit positions, including at points in the Tatyánivka area. However, it appears that dislodging Russian forces from the bridgehead has so far not been achieved. Several factors are working against this. Forested terrain, the so-called Zelenka, provides Russian assault groups with concealment and protection. The Sviatohirsk heights offer a tactical advantage, and the terrain itself limits the effectiveness of Ukrainian artillery fire. In support of the advancing Russian units, regular strikes using aerial bombs and possibly TOS-1A Solntsepiok thermobaric systems have been recorded since late April against Ukrainian forward positions in the stretch between Tatyánivka and Prishib. This is textbook fire support for a bridgehead offensive. If this bridgehead is held and expanded, the consequences for the defense of Sloviansk could be severe. The northern flank of the city would come under direct threat. Lyman direction. The encirclement tightens. Further south, on the Lyman direction, another round of tactical map corrections has been recorded. Russian units continue their methodical envelopment around Lyman, both to the south of the city and to the west. Individual positions have already been recorded directly on the Ukrainian side of the Siversky Donets in this area as well. Footage published today shows strikes by Russian FPV drone operators against Ukrainian forward positions. The overall picture on this sector remains consistent. The Russian side is systematically, step by step, constricting the operational space around Lyman, without forcing the pace, but steadily advancing toward the logical conclusion of this operational phase. East Sloviansk direction, Rye-Oleksandrivka. On the East Sloviansk sector, the map has also seen corrections. Ukrainian sources today published footage of strikes against Russian positions and assault groups operating in the area of the settlement of Rye-Oleksandrivka. The footage allowed geolocating specific positions, enabling the corresponding map updates. Fighting in this sector is ongoing. Kostyantynivka, the city is effectively blocked from the west. Now, the Kostyantynivka sector, where the past 24 hours have brought what can, without exaggeration, be called a turning point. Yesterday, the map was already being updated. Today, additional corrections were added north of the settlement of Ilinka. Analysis of the available data leads to a clear conclusion. Russian units have entrenched themselves in the area of the Chervone-Mistechko neighborhood. The Ukrainian side published footage of strikes against Russian positions in the area of Polyova and Kryva streets, and it was on the basis of precisely this material that the corrections were made. The result, as of today, the city of Kostyantynivka is effectively blocked from the west. Russian units have reached the first reservoir on the western side of the city. Western supply routes have been disrupted. Russian forces managed to drive a wedge between Dobiliya and Kostyantynivka, cutting off western logistics corridors. In total, by current estimates, the Russian side controls up to 28% of the city's territory and continues to develop its offensive. In support of these actions, regular aerial bomb strikes are being carried out north of Kostyantynivka. The objective is clear: to disrupt rotation, resupply, and the movement of reinforcements to the Ukrainian units holding the city. Dobiliya direction, mining infrastructure as a tactical pivot point. On the Dobiliya direction, north of Belitska, further corrections have been recorded. Russian units have managed to secure a piece of industrial infrastructure, specifically the number 500 ventilation shaft of a coal mine. This territory has passed under Russian control. The logic of the next steps is fairly transparent. From these positions, the Russian side will likely push toward the spoil heap of the Belitska mine and toward the mine itself. The objective, to complete the encirclement of Belitske and sever the Ukrainian supply lines on this sector. The intensity of fighting here remains high. Slightly to the northwest, regular airstrikes continue against Ukrainian forward positions southwest of Dobiliya. Zaporizhzhia direction, the general battle enters a new phase. The Zaporizhzhia sector today is arguably the most dynamic in terms of mutual movement between the two sides. The Ukrainian side is intensifying its counteroffensive pressure against the positions of the Dnipro and East troop groupings. In the Uspinivka area on the northern Zaporizhzhia axis, additional corrections are being recorded. Neutral mapping services are noting new Ukrainian infiltration zones, which according to some sources are already reaching the areas of Novomykolaiivka and Kalinivske. Ukrainian assault groups are actively operating in this area and are attempting to widen the wedge between Uspinivka and Huliapol. At the same time, the Russian army, according to available data, is actively counterattacking on this axis, the goal being to cut off the Ukrainian wedge and restore the front line along the Radostne-Zlahoda axis, with a further push toward Novohrihorivka and Temirivka. In the Kharkiv area and south of Lukyanivske, footage was published today of strikes by Russian FPV drone operators against Ukrainian forward positions. On the basis of this material, as well as a comprehensive analysis of commentary from experts across all political orientations, pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian, and independent, the conclusion was reached that the Ukrainian side has managed to restore control over the grey zone between Hryhorivka and Stepnohursk. Russian units continue to hold their defensive positions in Stepnohursk itself, though it is clear that the Ukrainian side will push for further counterattacks on this line. At the same time, reports have emerged of a Russian offensive from the direction of Shcherbaki toward Novoandriivka. However, this information is currently circulating only among a number of pro-Russian analysts and has not been confirmed by footage or geolocations. We note it and continue to monitor. Taking the Zaporizhzhia situation as a whole, we are witnessing the continuation of the general Zaporizhzhia battle, which traces its origins back to January 2026. To the disconnection of Starlink terminals and the first wave of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Then came the Russian countermove in March, and now, at the end of April and into early May, a second wave of the Ukrainian counteroffensive has begun. At this moment, the Russian side is repelling multiple Ukrainian attacks across the entire front from Stepnohursk to Uspinivka. This is a large-scale operational confrontation, and its outcome will be of critical importance for the overall balance of forces on the southern sector. That's the picture for May 4, 2026, a day packed with significant developments. Several fronts have seen qualitative shifts, and the situation continues to evolve rapidly. We'll keep watching closely. If this briefing was useful, please leave a like. It makes a real difference to the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget the bell notification so you don't miss the next analysis. See you next time, friends. Take care.